Hey everybody, Steve Burns here from Chromolution.com. Today we're going to learn a displacement technique based on the position of another object, at least in this case, in empty. Let's go ahead and get started. So let's begin by making our object. So we're going to go and create a cube. So Shift A, Mesh, and go to Cube. I'm going to use the shortcut Control 4. And what that does is it adds a modifier. It's a shortcut for adding the subdivision surface modifier. Let me pull this over a little bit. And I've got a levels of view of 4. And I'm also going to make the render 4. So if I decide to render this, then they're both going to be the same result visually. All right, now when done, what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply all of that. Okay, so I don't want that modifier slowing my system down. All right, now from here, we're going to add some textures to this. All right, so let's go ahead and add a material. Go to my material tab, add a new material, and call it what you want. We're going to keep it material for now. And I tell you what, we'll rename this. We'll call this mountainous. All right, so mountains, we'll just say mountains. Okay, it's gonna have kind of a mountain style of an effect. Okay, so what I want to do now at this point is actually go to our node systems. Let's go over here to the shading tab, which gives us our node system right down here in the bottom. And let's zoom in close to our sphere. Now to see the effect, we're going to add a displacement. In order to see the displacement, we have to be in render mode. We have to be in cycles. Okay, so that's very important. So I'm going to come right up here to my rendering option, my rendering tab, the little 35mm camera. By default, it's an EV. We're going to go to cycles. I'm going to make sure GPU compute has been selected. And for the feature set, I'm going to select experimental. Okay, so once that's set up, we're pretty much good to go for the next step. All of this effect we're about to make is going to be based off of this displacement input here. So what we want to do is to create an object. In this example, it's going to be an empty that's going to actually affect where the displacement is going to happen on this sphere. All right, so the first thing I'm going to want to do is add a displacement node. So we're going to put the BSDF just right out of the way, just for the temporarily. And let's bring in a displacement. So Shift A, go to my search and just type in the displacement right there. It sees it on the vector. And we're going to connect it to the displacement, or direct to displacement. All right, now we're going to connect two more nodes, and these are going to be the main nodes that's going to drive this effect. One node is going to be a gradient node. The other node is going to be a noise node. And let me kind of just basically explain what they're going to do. Let's go put the gradient node in first. We'll go to search, and let's go over here and type in gradient text. That's it. Okay, so we got our gradient texture. Next, noise texture. That's going to add the mountainous effect. Okay, so it's Shift A, and we're going to go over here and just type in noise, and the noise texture, we're going to set it right down here. And let's talk about these two. Your gradient texture is going to be a thing that's going to determine the actual distance from the ball that the mountainous texture is going to create. So the noise texture is going to create the mountainous feelings or the mountainous displacement, while the gradient texture is going to determine how close it is going to be to the sphere in terms of its effect, or how far away it's going to be toward your empty, right? Okay, so now what I like to do at this point is go ahead and connect these two textures to the displacement. Okay, in order to do so, we need something that's going to join the two together, and we're going to use a multiply mode, but to be specific, it's a math node. So oftentimes you see presenters say, just put in a multiply mode. It's not called multiply mode. It's a math node. So we go to Shift A, go to search, type in math, right? There's the math, and we're going to put it right down here. We want this to be a multiply effect. So add is what's by default. Drop it down and go to multiply. There's your multiply node, right? Okay, so just keep in mind that when you hear that, there's always a math node, add mode. You can do add, subtract. These are similar to what you see in Photoshop for their layer blend modes. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take the gradient and we're going to put it into one value. So your math node is made up of two values. It's designed to blend two different types of texture effects. So I'm going to take the factor out of noise as well as gradient and put each one into each of the factors into the multiply. The value of the multiply is going to plug right into, you probably guessed it, the height. Okay, so they're going to drive the height of the effect. Now, we're not going to be able to see anything just yet, primarily because we don't have the render mode turned on, and we're going to do that next. Okay, let's go bring your cursor at the top here, hit the Z key for zebra on your keyboard, and then hit rendered. All right, now I don't have a light in here just yet, so I'm going to go place a light in here now. So Shift A, go to my light source, and we'll just add in a sunlight to keep it simple. There it is. Okay, so now we're seeing our some sort of an effect or a bump effect on here. Okay, so let's kind of keep that in mind for now. Let's bring the light texture up a little bit. So hit the G key and bring the light up over to the right. I think I'm going to also tell the light to target the actual cube, which is what we have here. All right, so cube is my object, so I'm going to turn on light targeted right over here on the right hand side, the third icon on our vertical right side menu here, where our nice colorful icons are. Third one up is our constraints. Click on the constraints, drop it down under the tracking column right here. Go to track to, and then for the target, tell it to track to this, or click the eyedropper and click the object, and then the sun's always going to track to it. The sun right now, in my opinion, is a little bit is not bright enough. So clicking on the sunlight, coming down to the lighting options here, the lighting tab, you can see the strength is 1. Let's take it on up to 8. There we go. That's a little bit brighter. And if we like, we can pull this out. My background's pretty dark, so your background is the 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th icon down. It's like the picture of the world with a slash through it. And I have black. Let's bring that up a little bit so we can see, differentiate the edges of our object, so we can see exactly what's going on here. There we go. All right, so if we take the sun, and I think what I'm going to do is just bring the sunlight forward just a little bit like so, and then up. You can see the sunlight's always pointing to our object. Okay, so it looks like what we have on here is a bump effect. And what I like to do is to make sure that I also have a displacement. Now, we're going to go back down to our materials tab. To see the displacement, we want to make sure that we go to our settings and make sure that your displacement, let's go down to displacement here, go to the settings, and by default it's bump only. So displacement, settings, not bump only, but go ahead and target displacement and bump, the view them. And if I click it, there it is. Now we've got our displacement happening. Very cool. All right, so now this is where it gets very interesting. What I want to do next is I want to add a texture coordinate based off of this gradient texture. Now remember, the gradient texture is going to determine how strong the effect is going to be away from the actual sphere, the surface of the sphere. I also want this to be controlled by an empty, which is basically an object that won't render, but it will have an effect within your within your 3D scene. So first of all, let's go ahead and put in an empty. So I'm going to hit the Shift A, and I think what I like to do is come right down here to the empty, and you've got all these different options here. I'm going to grab the sphere, and as you can see this orange representation of your empty. Now the empty will never render. It'll just be there as an interactive element in your scene. The interactive element in this example is we're going to utilize it so that we can say base this effect that we're seeing on our object to affect the areas that is actually going to be placed around your object. So wherever this empty is placed, that's where the effect is going to happen. All right, so let's go click on the object. Now, we're going to bring the texture coordinate and the mapping information off of this gradient. So we're going to hit the Control T using Node Wrangler. Control T, all right. Make sure your Node Wrangler option is activated in Blender. And then right over here under the texture coordinate, you got an option for object, right? So if I click this down, we can tell it what object that's going to have an effect here. And if I click the empty, all right, now we're going to have the empty targeted. And we're going to do something a little bit different now. We're not going to see an effect happen yet. If I move it around, it looks like we're seeing nothing happening, but something is happening. This is what's going on. Under the gradient texture, which is going to be our command for telling it how strong this effect is going to be off a sphere, it's linear, right? So something's happening, but everything's sitting in one place. I want this to be instead spherical. And when I click it, look at what happens. Wow. All right, so we're going to make sure the empty is selected, and as we move the empty around, we're going to try to get this effect that's going to happen. So as we observe, as we move the object around, our empty, nothing's happening, and that's only because of one reason. Let's select our object one last time, and we already made this spherical, telling it, okay, we want it pretty much based on where our empty is located. Now we need to do one last thing. Under the texture coordinate, we need to pull this out of generated and tell it to use the object, the entire object, as the source of the effect. All right, so we're going to grab this, place this into the vector. That replaces it. Now, if we go to the object, hit the G key and move this around, we can now see, let's go ahead and click on this, G key, there we are. It's tracking the object. So if I just move this around to the side a little bit and play around with this one, so the G key, there it is, okay? Now, wherever we place the object, let's go ahead and bring this closer so we can get a better look at this. So G, it's going to stick. There it is. I have my effect. Now, if I want to give it a stronger effect or affect the nature of the texture on here, I'm going to select the object again. Let's go back down here. Go to the noise. Let's actually be able to see this a little bit up here in the top. We're going to go to the noise texture down here, and we're going to play with the scale. We go up, the scale gets, you can see that effect there. We go down lower, you get a smoother effect. I'm going to scale this up like so. That's looking pretty good. I can play around with the detail. You can just kind of play around and see what you like here. The roughness, I want more. I like the texture. Okay. All right. So now let's go to my empty. Hit the G key. I'm going to move it outward a little bit. See, if I move it out, it goes away. The further out I go, it starts to disappear. Now I'm going to bring it out until it completely disappears. Now this we're going to kind of talk about the value or the gradient here, right? So the gradient, let's kind of pull this in closer, is coming from this texture coordinate here. But it's also texture coordinates plugged into the mapping. The mapping is going to change the sizing and the effect of the actual texture that we have. If we go to the scale and select them all, let's see if I click and drag left to right, we can see that as I move it to toward a negative number, it gets bigger. If I go more positive, it gets smaller. So this is affecting the strength of it. Now, I'm going to select them all. And I think it was all 1 by default. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a value node right in here. So hit the Shift A. And all the value node does is it allows you to use one place to control the intensity of whatever it is that you're plugging into. So VAL, all right, there's value, and grab it, put it down here, put it right in the scale, right? Okay, and now we can control this effect, control this value. There we go. This way. Okay, go ahead and target my object again, G. See, now I'm getting a little bit of a different effect here. Okay, so be aware that we have these very, very cool effects that we can make with this. And this can easily be something like an explosion, the beginning of an explosion of a planet or of some sort. So G key, move it out. All right, move it out, in, out, okay. And as I move it in as well, let's go back and take a look at that value. Let's go ahead and click on our object, and let's go into the value and let's move this around a little bit. Now you can see the types of effects you're going to get here. Let's move over to our displacement. And let's take a look at the scale of the displacement. I can see this. All right, now we can also play with its scale. So now, it's getting a little closer. We grab our object, and now we get a different effect coming out of it. So as this gets closer to the planet, say, for example, this is a black hole ripping a planet apart. As it gets in closer, it starts to rip it apart, bringing it into the black hole, absorbing it. So, kind of cool. All right. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. It's a lot of fun. It's a great little displacement techniques where you don't have to worry about utilizing geometry nodes. Now, one of the little things I want to add to this is we can add more modifiers. Say I want this to be a lot smoother. I can add another displacement modifier right down here. Now, this is our subdivision surface. Now, instead of a displacement, let's do a subdivision surface modifier. And there we go. That'll help smooth it out a little bit. There we are. And that's going to help you to add a little more detail, a lot more detail. So if we go back to our empty, and play around with this, and it's going to start to slow down a little bit because you're adding a lot more, math is being calculated utilizing the subdivision surfaces, but you're getting a nicer visual effect. Okay, that was it. All right, so I hope you all enjoyed that. This is Steve Burns from Chromolution.com. More to come. Enjoy.